Welcome to the Milsurf Mike channel. I had written and planned to do a quick history of Poland leading up to its independence on November 11, 1918, mainly because it showed national pride continued even though Poland ceased to be an independent state for 123 years, and I had relatives who fought in the Blue Army during World War I. But that is adding to what is already going to be a longer video, as the history of the VIS pistol is deeply entrenched with national pride, Poland being overrun by Germany and the Soviet Union, German occupation, the Polish resistance and Holocaust, and Poland unfortunately becoming a Soviet satellite state. Shortly after independence, Poland fought and won against the Soviet Bolsheviks in what began as an eastern border dispute. Although the Red Army pushed to Warsaw, the Poles with French aid were able to turn the tide. For the next decade, the Polish military was equipped with an assortment of rifles and pistols. By the late 1920s, the Polish government formed the PWU, an acronym for what you see across the screen, moving tooling from the German factory in Danzig as reparations to a new facility in Radom to produce a standardized rifle based off the Karabiner 98AZ and VZ-24. They also began work on a self-loading rifle, but that ended up getting lost during the German invasion. The official standard pistol was the 1895 Nagant revolver, although a myriad of pistols, mainly from former Habsburg Empire nations, filled the ranks. The Polish government had decided to adopt an autoloading pistol, but to fill the gap, they purchased the tooling for producing the Nagant revolver from FN in 1930 to produce the last true Nagant revolvers. In 1929, the Armaments Department and Ministry of War had approved a payment to CZ to produce the CZ-24. The technical director of the PWU, Andrei Dovkonc, had obtained a copy of this agreement. One of his co-workers, Piotr Vilnievchits, was there to promote the adoption of submachine guns. Dovkonc showed Vilnievchits the agreement for the CZ-24 and 380. Vilnievchits had one and saw nothing about it that would make it suffice for a military pistol. Vilnievchits told Dovkonc that he would come up with a layout in 2 days, and the two would present this to the ministry that they had a design they spent considerable time and money on in an attempt to get the ministry to delay the agreement with CZ. Neither expected the ruse to work, but national pride took hold in the ministry, and several days later they replied that they would delay the CZ deal for 3 months to let them come up with a domestically designed and produced pistol. After the basic design was formulated, Jan Skipinski joined PWU to help in development of the pistol. He and Vilnievchits formed a friendship, agreed to join forces to complete the pistol, and equally share license fees. The trust became so great that this ended up being a handshake agreement. Vilnievchits would take care of the design, and Skipinski would handle the manufacturing. Since Vilnievchits had so little time, he decided to base his design off an already successful design instead of designing a pistol from scratch. He also decided upon a 9mm parabellum, as he considered anything less to not have enough stopping power, and was able to persuade the military on the merits of the 45 ACP. Vilnievchits believed the FN 1903 and the Colt 1911 to be the most modern pistol designs of the day. Since the 1903 had an unlocked breech, and he knew trying to assuage the military's suspicions of this design was a fool's errand, he went on trying to improve the design of the 1911. The major changes including the movable barrel link was eliminated and replaced with a camming surface on the barrel and frame. The movable barrel bushing was replaced by one permanently threaded in. The recoil spring, guide, and bushing were combined into one captive rigid unit, removal of the manual safety, and repositioning the ejector to the center line location. Once the design was completed, Skipinski and his engineers completed the drawing and tooling was rolled up to produce the prototypes. They applied for the Polish patent on January 15, 1931, and the first prototype was completed and the first shots were fired in February. Skipinski suggested they name the pistol the VIS, spelled W-I-S, for Vilnievchits and Skipinski. The patent was granted on February 8, 1932. The Department of Armaments and Ministry of War conducted tests on the pistol and performed exceptionally. 6,000 rounds were fired without malfunctions or broken parts. It did fail a drop test, which was remedied by changing the rigid guide rod to a telescoping rod. Although the Army complained about lack of a safety lever, Vilnievchits was able to convince them that when uncocked, it was safe as the hammer rested on the breech block safety. Another demonstration for the military addressed a couple other complaints. Extending the frame so it was flush with the top of the grip safety got rid of the sharp corners where the safety pivoted into the frame. A hammer drop lever was added to the left side of the slide, as a cavalry representative pointed out that they only had one hand free to manipulate the pistol and would be able to lower the hammer with their shooting hand. The Armament Department was impressed and agreed to acquire the patent on March 16, 1933. It was here they requested a name change from VIS to VIS, spelled W-I-S, to VIS, which means force in Latin. The official nomenclature was the Pistolet VIS WZ-35. The reason for 35 is that it took a while for field trials and tooling up of the Radom factory produced the pistol. A side note, many people in the United States refer to this as the Radom pistol, which is technically wrong. Radom is the name of the city where the pistol, along with many other firearms for the Polish military, was produced. The pistol should be referred to as the VIS or VIS-35. Also, since there's really no other good place to talk about this, there's some debate whether FN had anything to do with the design of this pistol. In my original script for this, I called this FUD lore, as my source, Robert J. Berger's book, repeats Vilnievitch's downplaying the influence of the high power, saying the FN story came from the invading Germans in the 1940s and later on the Czechs. In checking my information against Forgotten Weapons video on the VIS, Ian very strongly suggests that the high power did have some sway in the design. His source was a conversation with Leszek Infrecht, someone very knowledgeable in Polish weaponry. The story here is that the Polish obtained early versions of the high power during their trials, and they eventually wanted to adopt the high power over the CZ-24, but dumped FN due to problems with the BAR contract. This contradicts the story I've already told about Dovkant and Vilnievitch scheming to delay the Polish government to delay the contract with ZZ to produce the CZ-24. While I give much credence to the story coming from Berger based on Vilnievitch himself said, the difference in stories which come from other prominent firearms historians must be acknowledged, as Ian isn't keen on repeating FUD lore. Issuance to troops was delayed until sufficient numbers were produced, as well as shooting instructions in 1937, and dress instructions were issued in 1938. The cost per pistol was $23 in 1933, which would equate to $465 in 2021, and was down to $17 just prior to the invasion, or $322 in 2021. So not only was this one of the best military pistols in the world, it was also one of the most affordable. The quality of the pistol was not ignored by their neighbors to the west. On August 23, 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Non-Aggression Pact, paving the way for the invasion of Poland. On September 1st, Germany bombed Warsaw, invaded from Prussia in the north and Slovakia in the south. The Poles asked for assistance from Great Britain and France at 8 a.m. that morning. It wasn't until the 3rd before Britain and France declared war on Germany, and even then did very little as France stuck to a defensive war plan. The Germans neared Warsaw by the 8th, after nearly covering 140 miles. All hope for the Poles were dashed on the 17th, as the Red Army crossed the Polish border from the east, and Poland was split in two. Warsaw surrendered on the 27th of September. German occupation brings the next phase in the VIS's history. The city of Radom fell on September 11th, and Germany soon tasked Steyr, who is now known by Steyr Daimler Puch Werk, with overseeing production of the VIS pistol. This is similar to the arrangement of DWM managing Fabrique Nationale in Belgium. Under this supervision, there were 3 phases of production. Some small parts were produced in the rifle factory in Warsaw, slides and frames were made and the pistols were fitted together in Radom, and the barrel production and final acceptance were done at the Steyr factory in Austria due to mistrust of the local Polish workers. Polish resistance had a myriad of ways to finish and smuggle pistols out of the factory for a while. They were able to pilfer many barrels from the factory before the Germans established security, and an underground shop was established in Warsaw to make barrels. Pistols were smuggled out of the factory in a myriad of ways. Pistols would be hidden in the supply warehouse and be smuggled out when supply runs were requested. They would also smuggle them out in an official capacity. When pistols were to be delivered from the factory, the resistance would forge the documents, so plant security believed that more were meant to leave the factory than what were actually ordered. The extras would then be dropped off at fronts for the resistance. Another official way that would prevent suspicion in the factory would be to clone serial numbers. Once the pistols got to the end of the line, the clone pistol would be snuck over to the warehouse to leave during a supply run. Once in resistance hands outside the factory, the serial numbers would be ground off to prevent tracing. This worked pretty well until September 1942, when 6 resistant commandos armed with smuggled VIS pistols boarded a train to kill a Nazi collaborator. They were surrounded by Gestapo and a shootout took place. 4 commandos escaped, 1 was killed, and 1 was captured. Worse for the smuggling operation is that 2 of the pistols fell into Gestapo hands. 1 didn't have the serial number removed, and the others was able to be determined via forensic evaluation in Berlin. The serials were traced to police units in Poland, who still had their pistols. The Radom factory was shut down and more duplicate parts were discovered. Interrogations and executions abounded. Extra stamps were added to the slide and frames, which made it more difficult to counterfeit. It was also around this time that Jewish slave labor started taking place as civilians, becoming a quarter of the factory's workforce. A Schindler's List scenario occurred where the industrial lobby wanted to keep experienced yet cheap slave Jewish labor, which prevented many of them from being exterminated. Still, many Jews were shot for quote-unquote unsatisfactory work or quote-unquote sabotage, mainly as examples. As the Russians neared the Vistula River in June 1944, the civilian forces let go and the Jewish prisoners were marched the 150 miles to Auschwitz on foot. The factory was set up in a city I can't pronounce, Czechoslovakia, where they continued to make the pistols until March 8, 1945, when the factory was bombed. Also worth mentioning, there were 40,000 complete pistols produced by Steyr in Austria from June 1944 to Russian occupation in April 1945. Many of these would sport the serrated wooden grips and are well into the last of the 4 groups of the VIS pistols. These would be the last of the VIS pistols produced, as the Soviet Union would force Poland to standardize to their weaponry, and the Radom factory would start producing their copy of the Tokarov pistol after the war. To use a favorite phrase of our new press secretary, I'm going to circle back a little bit here and go over the basics of these 4 groups. The first group were what are called the Polish Eagle group, as these are the ones produced for the Polish military, as well as those assembled from leftover pieces already made after the invasion. These sported the Polish Eagle on the slide and have the takedown latch. These should have black plastic grips with VIS on one side and FB on the other. The serial number should range 1 through 50,000. The second group are the first pistols completely produced under German occupation. The Eagles replaced with German markings, although they surprisingly kept the Polish patent number on there. These pistols still have the takedown latch, and the stock slot has been added to the heel. The serial numbers are roughly 1 through E8000. The third group sees the stock slot removed, and you start seeing some brown checker grips and even the wooden serrated grips in this group. The takedown latch is still retained on these. The third group serials are roughly E8000 to Z5000. The fourth group saw the removal of the takedown latch for simplification in production. The finish on these pistols also deteriorated as the war went on. These numbered from Z5000 to the second alphabet series K9000, my pistols. Both of my pistols are 4th series pistols, as neither have a takedown latch or lanyard loop. This, along with the WAA 77 proof mark, which began in the 3rd series, tells me my serials are in the 2nd alphabet series. The pistol I shot has reproduction grips made for early series pistols, which is why the screw kept wanting to come out. A previous owner had put non-standard aftermarket walnut grips on the one after bringing it back. The reason I purchased it was that it was priced around half of what the going rate for the VIS pistols are now. It shoots very well, just as you would expect from a derivative of a 1911 and a 9mm. I'd like to put some new springs in the one that I didn't shoot, as well as some new magazines. The VIS has an excellent reputation, while 9mm 1911s don't when it comes to malfunctions. 9mm 1911s generally have feed angle issues, while it looks like it was designed to not have these problems in the VIS. Last week I made a top 5 World War II pistol video, and the VIS 35 was definitely on it. Please be aware of where your elected officials and the groups that claim to represent you stand on the Second Amendment. Please join the GOA, the the largest no-compromise 2A group out there, and get $5 off your membership with the link in my description. If you like my content, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Engagement really does help with YouTube's algorithms. Please check out my Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Parler, and who I support on Patreon. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.